Question number 7, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koutou i te whare. My question is to the Minister responsible for Housing New Zealand Corporation. Does he stand by his statement that, quote, anyone that wants to have a go at this will have to show that they've got the capacity to manage the properties, to manage the finances, to look after the tenants and to help redevelop our social housing community, end quote.
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
On behalf of the Minister, yes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Will the Minister guarantee to New Zealanders that every State House property sold to a community housing provider will be retained for social housing indefinitely so that vulnerable tenants are properly looked after?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, as we've said previously, part of the contract will be that we expect they have to be taking on the tenants. If they wish to sell, to redevelop, for example, so where there are 2 or 3 houses to build 5 or 6, they would have to go to the Community Housing Regulatory Authority to seek permission to do that, and we would then have to know that it was in the best interests of the tenants and not a reduction in the number of houses.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Has the Minister, any of his officials or any other government MPs told Horizon Housing or other potential community housing providers that they can sell the properties on for a profit in the future as a sweetener for the deal?
Mr Speaker,
The Honourable Paula
on
Bennett.
behalf of the Minister for Housing New Zealand, I can only really speak for him and certainly for the Minister of Social Housing when I say absolutely not, and certainly not to our knowledge that anyone else has as well.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Has the Minister, any of his officials or any other government MP suggested to Horizon or other potential community housing providers a timeframe by which they can stop providing social housing and sell the properties on for a profit?
Mr Speaker,
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
On behalf of the Minister, no, not to our knowledge, and if they were doing that, it would not be at the direction of ministers.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the Minister guarantee that if the government permits the providers to sell the properties on for a profit at a later date, that the Crown will have first right of refusal to buy those properties back and keep them for social housing purposes?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, we're working our way through what that contract will look like as far as when the purchase is done and how we ensure that they need to go to the Community Housing Regulatory Authority for that. But the purpose behind it most certainly is to ensure that we are still providing services to tenants and housing for them. So we can't sort of precipitate every situation that might occur, but what we will be doing is ensuring that they are in the interests of tenants and not just a property making for that.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Has Horizon or any other potential community housing provider discussed with the Minister, his officials or other government MP that any purchase would be reliant on those providers being able to sell the houses on for a profit at a later date?
Mr Speaker,
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
I can only speak on behalf of the Minister of Housing New Zealand and the Minister of Social Housing and say absolutely not, and if anyone else has, it has certainly not been at their direction.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What discount has the government offered Horizon or other community housing providers on the sale of the State House properties, given that New Zealand state housing providers have said that they would have to be sold at virtually nil in order to make long-term social housing financially viable for those providers?
Mr Speaker,
Honourable Paula
on
Bennett.
behalf of the Minister, we have received no bids and we are not at the negotiation stage.
Question number 8,